This week, an all-new episode of Critiquing Comics. Jason and I discuss Jane Jett Book 1, Nuclear Shadows, by writer Amal Desai and artist Paul Essenson, a book that recalls Dave Stevens Rocketeer. And Adam joins me to discuss the first two issues of the post-apocalyptic The Fog Within, by writer Sean Wood and artist Deivid Deon. First, I'd like to thank our patrons for helping to keep the show going. You can join them by going to patreon.com/deconcomics and pledging a small monthly donation. Or if you'd rather give a one-time donation, you can do so via PayPal by sending it to mail@deconstructingcomics.com. We appreciate your support. This is Tim.
This is Jason.
This is Adam.
And this is Critiquing Comics. Welcome to Critiquing Comics. This is Tim in Tokyo. Jason is in Portland, Oregon. Good morning, sir. Or good evening for you, I guess.
Good afternoon to everybody. It's the afternoon of my years.
Well, yeah, I hear that. So we have a comic called Jane Jett. Not Jane Jetson. Jane Jett. Book 1, Nuclear Shadows. I haven't figured out what the subtitle is referring to. Created by writer Amal Desai and artist Paul Essenson. Published by Marcosia. So immediately when I saw this, I thought Dave Stevens Rocketeer. That's
Same.
Clearly in the kind of a starting point for this, I think. The artwork as well as the concept. So this has not... Well, it's something else I want to talk about. But basically, just to summarize how it starts, there's a hero called Rocket Man. It doesn't look exactly like Rocketeer, but the concept is similar. And in World War II, of course, he was fighting for the Allies, and now it's the 50s, and he's become a wife abuser, and his wife is Jane, and she was also a hero, Jane Jett, and she gets tired of him beating her up, and she launches a piece of their rocket equipment at him, and it flies away with him, and she's convinced that he is now dead. She's killed him, and she's got to go on the run. So that's kind of how it starts. Nobody looks like Betty Page in this book, so it doesn't take that aspect of Rocketeer. But yeah, I thought that's how it starts. But the artwork is, like I said, reminiscent of Dave Stevens, but it's nice. It's well done. I had some storytelling issues with it that we'll talk about, but what did you think of it?
I agree that the artwork is very clean. It's well done. It definitely evokes a sort of old-timey comic pace. Mm-hmm. There is no decompression here. Page 1, we're introduced to Rocket Man. By page 4, there's the inciting incident. We jump into it pretty quickly. I also thought the Nuclear Shadows, I sort of felt like this is a generation still dealing with World War II.
Mm-hmm, sure.
And this also feels like an alternate history. We're going to run into a Nazi later. So I feel like there is, we're still reckoning with what the war did to us and what it's like to live outside of war. Right off the bat, the lettering is really good.
Okay.
Get that out of the way. I thought the lettering was great. The artwork is pretty solid. Let's talk about the story.
Okay. I didn't have any particular issues with the story, but what did you see that bothered you?
Well, one thing I liked is that they do these flashbacks, and they do them in a really clever way. They almost look like pictures in an old-timey photo album.
Old photos that are kind of sepia.
Yeah, and they're sort of cut into the paper. The corners are held in.
Mm-hmm.
I like that a lot.
Yeah,
it's a pretty straightforward story. It's a simple story. I guess the character work, we followed Jet Girl throughout the whole piece. She's plucky, she's resilient, but she's almost on the run immediately. And I don't really feel like I know her too well.
Yeah, that's true. That would have been a little more effective if we'd gotten to know her more first.
Yeah, I mean, she's a survivor. I see that, but I can't tell you what she wants out of this, where she's going, except that she's on the run, which is not a bad mechanism. I just think going forward, maybe giving her a little bit more some character traits that are not just flying around in a rocket and being a hero. Like, I'm rooting for her because she's a battered housewife. So obviously she has my sympathies right away, and I want her to get away from this. But the character work is pretty light throughout. It's a light, breezy piece. You know, bad guys are bad guys. Hired agents are hired agents because that's their role. So that was one thing. I was waiting for a twist or something, and maybe I'm bringing modern sensibilities to this. The other question I had is it seems like he's been abusing his wife for some time. And early on, we find out that their house has been under constant surveillance since the war. So assumably there is a long official record of his abuse towards her. Now, I know this is the 50s, and you know, I'm putting a modern lens to this as far as women's rights and advocacy, but it seems like she should be able to justify getting out of this relationship pretty easy. But that's never brought up. So there is this idea that she's now a fugitive and on the run. I go with it because of the time period where women didn't have a lot of agency, but it's stuck in my craw. It's a logic jump that you have to go with.
Yeah, well, what would 24-hour, constant surveillance be like in the 50s? I mean, it's not like they've got video cameras all over the place. But apparently somebody is watching in person.
Even if they're just listening, they would know.
Yeah, it could have been mics,
that many a crime has been perpetrated against her and that she should have much proof to leave. So they're chasing her for murdering her husband, which, you know, it's a good setup. Although at the end, there's something else that happens that then throws this whole plot into further question without giving too much away. But the artwork is great. I just think the story could have used a little bit more. The character work is really light. And there's a lot of actions, well done, well choreographed. The colors are great. That was my impression. Is that I just wanted a little bit more character work from them, and not people just being good for the sake of being good, and friends being friends for the sake of being friends. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The characters are interesting. So it's almost like a post-war thing. It seems like every state has their own heroes, sort of like post-war, Cold War heroes. The Fist of Peace is one, and I thought those were really interesting. I thought that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, there's this whole stable of heroes that they refer to HFP, which I saw on the side of their headquarters building. It said Heroes for Freedom and Peace. And I guess all the heroes in this are members of that. It wasn't quite clear to me if they're all in it or not. But, I mean, you think if Jane Jett was a member of it, that they wouldn't necessarily just be trying to kill her for killing her husband.
Yeah. That's what I mean. It's very reactionary. It's just very simple logic. Like, you killed your husband. Now we're going to kill you because you committed murder, maybe, even though we've got a lot of proof that you are escaping a bad situation.
Yeah.
But, you know, that's my modern look at it. If you look at this from the 50s, from the time period it takes place in, I think it's less of an issue, less of a leap.
So, now, I mean, this is hardly unique to this comic, but I was noticing, like, if this is supposed to be the 50s, some of the things don't fit. I mean, kind of minor. Well, some of the clothing, like the character Tomi, she looks too modern to me. And some of the vocabulary also, like the guy says 24/7, which I don't think anybody was saying until the late 90s. But that kind of thing happens all the time.
Yeah. That didn't stick out to me too much. I felt like they also were bringing some modern sensibilities into a lot of these relationships, which I'm okay with. I felt like this was a alternate post-war reality. I don't know if you remember, there was a series called Vikings from Vertigo, probably 10, 15 years ago. And Brian Wood was the writer on it. And he was like, I'm not even going to try to write like Viking language where everyone talks like Thor. He had them all talk in a modern vernacular. He was just like, we're just doing it. You got used to it after a couple of issues.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, yeah, I can see that when it's that much time has passed. I mean, if you try to do accurate dialogue, nobody's going to understand it. So just kind of translate it into modern English. But when it's something that's just like a few decades back, then you I anyway, kind of expect that it's going to be accurate to the time, English-wise, but it's often not. And I'm not sure if that's accidental or on purpose.
Right. Even the cursing, too. Like, you need to tell me what the F is going on. But it's breezy. It moves down. It goes by quick. It's a good action piece. It's all action, to be frank.
Yeah. Yeah, true.
So hopefully going forward in more chapters, I would like to know more what Jane Jett wants in the world, like what she wants for a life for herself. Rarely do I say this, but I think it should slow it down a little bit and spend some time with the character and work on the character. Because the action's good, the art's good. I like the world in it. It's a good introduction. It's a good primer to this world. If you like the Rocketeer and you have a Rocketeer-sized hole in your heart, this is a good place to start. And damn, that lettering is great.
It gets the Jason McNamara lettering seal of approval.
So many books we've seen where the lettering just takes it down, and it's really actually well done.
And the lettering is done by the writer Amal Desai. So. I had a few little quibbles on page 20. So when Jane Jett is up against the Fist of Peace and she defeats him, and then the first panel on page 20, she thinks this could come in handy. But I think she's picking up the fist device of the Fist of Peace, but I think it's not quite clear enough in the panel. I mean, it would have been. I would have expected like a panel that just features that fist, but you kind of distracted by her face here and her hand that's holding the fist device, and it kind of gets lost in the art, I think.
You're right. There's a red piece of metal on the other side that creates a tangent. I think it's wrapped around her, maybe, is what it is. I will say also, he seemed to have the power to recall that fist. So I kept waiting for that fist to get pulled out of the car and returned to him.
On page 38, it's 38 of the PDF. It's a 2-page spread, actually, but the PDF counts it as one. In those first two panels, as Jane is, resting in the first panel and crying in the second panel, Tomi is working on things, and for some reason she's put in silhouette, which made me feel like, she must be doing something evil. I questioned the choice of putting her in silhouette.
I think it's just to help with the scale and the foreground, background elements, but that so much of the panel is in silhouette. Yeah. Probably doesn't need to be. What you could have done is just use, a thinner line weight, or
maybe just like draw it, but just color it all gray, maybe, so you can make out what it is, but it's not highlighted by being in color. And Jane in the foreground colored more brightly, and that would make her stand out. One other thing, on page 44, there's another battle with Fist of Peace, and she shoots some kind of a missile at him, or I guess it's the fist that she shoots back at him. And he's got this sword now that he picked up from one of the other heroes. And then in the gutter, it says thump, 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 thump. And I wasn't sure what was making that sound. Apparently, it's this fist missile coming at. Does that mean that it's like hitting trees as it's going, or what? I wanted some explanation of what thump, 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 thump was.
I think it's been, if you look in the reflection of his visor, he's being hit by multiple objects.
Oh, okay, that's reflection. I didn't.
Yeah.
get what was going on with his eyes there.
Yeah, I agree. Like, as much as I've praised the action, maybe this went too fast. There is a projectile, but we're looking at it straight on, so we can't see sort of like the length of it.
Mm-hmm.
So it almost looks like a circle. So, and earlier on panel 3, we see it. There's also a thump in the gutter, which actually I don't like. So he hits it in the next panel. Is that all you? And then thump, thump, thump. Maybe that is her shooting them.
Maybe.
So honestly, so a thump is usually an impact, right? So maybe more like a whump whump.
Yeah, some different sound.
Yes.
I don't know.
That's the sound of her shooting the projectiles at him. That last image is great, though, on that page.
Yeah, the explosion.
The effect behind him, the sound effect behind him, well done.
Yeah, I like that. Okay, so, yeah, it's reasonably good. There are things that could be adjusted both with the art and with the kind of setup of the story, but it's one of the better comics I think we've gotten for critiquing comics over the years.
Absolutely. It's got a voice, it's consistent, it's got a style, it's consistent. I also like that they use the page space well. They throw in splash pages. They let the story breathe. I just think, again, just a little bit more character work would give this a little bit more gravitas. And if I knew what Jane wanted outside of, not being murdered for murdering her husband, that would be awesome.
Right.
Just she could be a good person, but like even good people, even Captain America has character traits, right? That make him human, and not everyone gets along. And so a little bit more interpersonal conflicts would be good. Not the people trying to kill her, but just character work between the characters. Yeah, it looks really good.
Check the show notes for a link to see a few pages of Jane Jett. Coming up, Adam joins me to discuss the first 2 issues of the post-apocalyptic The Fog Within. Is it trying to do too much? First, just a reminder that you can help this podcast by making your Amazon purchases via deconstructingcomics.com/Amazon. Follow the link to Amazon from there and make that your bookmark for future purchases. We'll then get a percentage of what you spend. It costs you nothing extra and helps us cover web hosting and other costs of presenting this show every week. We really appreciate your support. Edward and Alphonse Elric, as a result of attempting the forbidden act of resurrecting their mother with alchemy, have paid the price. Edward lost an arm and a leg. Alphonse lost his whole body, his soul now attached to a suit of armor. Together they search for a way to make their bodies complete again and uncover a deadly plot by their country's military rulers. That's the concept of Hiromu Arakawa's Fullmetal Alchemist, one of the best manga ever made. Tim and Patrick are rereading Arakawa's masterwork in search of interesting sound effects, translation errors, goofy humor, and, oh yeah, a great story. The podcast is The Law of Equivalent Exchange, a chapter-by-chapter look at the manga Fullmetal Alchemist. New episodes every other Monday, wherever podcasts are found. What are you willing to exchange? All right, I'm back, and now I'm with Adam, and we're going to talk about a different comic. How you doing, Adam?
I'm all right, Tim. It is, well, I don't know if these are put out on a delay, but it is now the Obon summer holiday, so
okay, we're doing this about 9 days before this will come out. So
okay, so it was a very nice Obon holiday.
Yeah, it's got its it's a festival with its roots in Buddhism. Other Asian countries celebrate similar kinds of things, like kind of welcoming back the spirits of the dead who visit at this time every year. Has some things in common with Halloween, but
yeah, it's like the Japanese version of Dia de los Muertos in Mexico, right? So.
Yeah, even more of that than Halloween. But anyway, the comic we have here is called The Fog Within by Sean Wood, the writer, and Deivid Deon, the artist. It's an unusual spelling of David, D-E-I-V-I-D. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. I'm assuming that it's David, but...
Yeah, I'm not sure.
By the time you hear this, the Kickstarter for their third issue of The Fog Within will be up, and I'll link to it. But we're going to be talking about the first two issues here, which Sean sent to us. And I have some points about both the writing and the art, and sometimes about how the two of them work together. And I mean, it's the first two issues are out. I wouldn't say go back and fix them, but just some things to keep in mind for the future.
You want to jump in on that, or
yeah?
I mean, I guess we can tell them, give a little bit of a synopsis about what it's about, I suppose, first. But
right. Well, so it's about this guy Hunter arriving in the future, which of course is post-apocalyptic. There are some flashbacks to his previous life. A lot left to be explained, maybe a little bit too much. And of course, there's a totalitarian government with stormtroopers and freedom fighters, and there's some kind of virus going around.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this book has potential, but some things bothered me about it. But let's talk about the good points first. What were some good points of this?
I think that the art is very accomplished. It's, I was worried, to be honest, when I saw because the PDF that we were sent, it has several different alternative covers included, and some of them look really great, but one of them looks almost AI done to me. And so I was worried that this was going to be one of those things where a writer, uses some software program to kind of create their comic, but it's not that at all. So the art style looks very much like it could be, any of the big studios, a Marvel or a DC kind of book. It's very actiony, kind of action adventure kind of thing. Everybody's very muscular. The poses are all very dramatic. So I definitely got a feel that this was inspired by reading that kind of material. The way that they talk, the dialogue and everything else is very much, like that kind of, big comic studio kind of vibe to it. And I'm not saying that as a, in a bad way. Like they're pulling off a style that I think a lot of people really like. It's a style that I probably would have done before I discovered more indie arty kind of comics back when I was in high school, and then I went a different route. Before that, I was really into that kind of stuff. So, I can totally see why this has had successful Kickstarters already to go with it, because it's done well. The lettering is done well. I'm sure that you're going to say something about, because you said the way that the art and the story go together. You probably say something about it, but I think that the placement of the word balloons and just the general kind of movement on the page is pretty well balanced and well done. It's a good combination of close-up shots and then long-distance shots, and the camera angle shows people from the backs and the front and the side and the top, and so it's very cinematic, is the way that I kind of want to say it. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'd agree with that. I don't know. Now, you might not have had this problem. Maybe it's me. I'm not sure. But I read the first issue, and I understood that Hunter had somehow been kind of zapped to the future. But I wasn't putting together that it had anything to do with fog until I read the synopsis at the beginning of issue 2. The recap clearly stated that this fog brought him to the future. And oh, okay. And then when I looked back at issue 1, I could kind of see the references to it, but it just didn't seem to me that they were quite explicit enough. And in particular, so now the cover, I mean, you mentioned there are several covers, but the first cover does imply that happening. There is fog, and you can see him moving from one period of time to another. But I guess I didn't really look at the cover much because especially I think with digital comics, a lot of people really don't examine comics covers anymore.
That's true.
And I don't think it's safe to try to use your cover as the first panel. You need to kind of spell it out more on the first page of the comic. Now, the first page, we've got Hunter lying in this alley, and there's some kind of burst behind him and a whoosh sound effect, but I didn't make a connection between him being there and the whoosh and the burst there. I didn't really know what that was.
Yeah, I didn't either, although I do think it's kind of a strong opener because you see him sort of just appear there and then somebody drags him off and he doesn't know what's going on either. And so I also didn't make the connection that had anything to do with fog. Even, actually, to be honest, even when I read issue 2, because he gets the powers at the end of issue 1 and then he sort of is trying to develop them in issue 2. And so I know that it has something to do with fog, but it wasn't very clear to me what it was exactly that, like how he was using the fog until probably towards the end of issue 2, to be honest.
I think it could have been clearer if we saw him like clearly emerging from some fog, or like maybe there would be a panel with fog and then the fog is lifting and you see him revealed from under the fog, or he falls through a cloud of fog, kind of like what's happening on the cover.
Right.
Something like that would have spelled it out a lot more.
Yeah, I agree. I'm still not entirely sure what the fog does. I mean, I assume that it allows him to travel in time, but
that's clearly not even been explained yet. I think that's still to come.
Yeah. I see it being kind of one of those things. It's almost like Nightcrawler teleporting in his little cloud of sulfur or whatever, but not in necessarily teleporting in space, but teleporting in time, maybe, is the way that I kind of saw it potentially being. But yeah, I mean, there's a few things that are left still kind of open, and I guess we can chalk that up to this being still in the beginning part of the story. But the fact that he's prophesied to save everybody, but he doesn't seem like much. He's just kind of like a high school boy, right, that got transported to the future.
Well, yeah, I'm a little fuzzy on his exact age, because it does appear that before this movement through time, he got married.
Oh, right. That's right. Okay. That's true. So yeah, it does, because the beginning is kind of, it shows time moving quite quickly, doesn't it? I guess like a lot of things happen at once, because it shows him getting graduating and stuff like that. So I guess he's a young adult, but
yeah. What kind of bothered me was that at the end of issue 2, he still kind of doesn't know what's going on, and neither do we. And I felt like, if he's the hero, I mean, obviously he's not going to figure this all out immediately, but I wish he had a clearer goal, let's say. You know, what are the stakes? What's his aim here? And that's not really explained yet, I don't think.
Yeah, that's true. He is very much that kind of Joseph Campbell kind of archetypal character. So he's like
call to adventure,
like a Luke Skywalker. Yeah, exactly. He's like a Luke Skywalker or somebody like that, where he doesn't know what's going on and it's all explained to him, which is a cool plot device always. But you're right. At the end of 2, there's never a convincing reason for why he's decided to join this team, this rebellion.
Yeah, just because he's supposed to, because he's prophesied to. Like,
yeah,
okay.
Exactly.
I guess I will, since I'm here.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So it's, and like I said, it could be that this is still pretty early on in the story, that maybe there'll be more reason for him to act in the later issues. But
yeah, I would think so. But I think it should have happened before the end of issue 2.
Yeah. I got to say one thing. This has nothing to do at all with what we're just talking about, but it's taking everything within me to not make puns about the word fog as we're talking. Like, oh, the details are a little foggy. And that's like that. So, and also another aside is that the font on the cover, it looks very much like The Fog, like the John Carpenter movie, The Fog, which that would make me inclined to read it more if the cover looked more like the first cover, where you said, you can see him moving through two different worlds, and one looks this really happy, idyllic kind of childhood, and one is like this,
hellscape.
Hellscape. And he's moving through fog. So it's a little bit on the nose, but it works really well. But it would have been kind of cool just to see it be a really nebulous, like just a foggy cover, and it says The Fog Within or something. That would make me kind of intrigued. I am very glad that...
Easy to draw.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, just some effects there. I am very glad that they did not choose the one that I said looks sort of like AI. I think it's the third.
The third one, yeah, I see what you mean. It does look computer generated.
Yeah, it might not be, but that's just how I saw it. But
it might have been human controlled computer art, but
yeah,
it's not the best one.
But yeah, so yeah, basically, it all, the panel grids, like the way that every page is laid out, the way that the characters are designed and stuff, it does look very much like a Marvel kind of sci-fi book. I think it's definitely not bad. The colors are all really, like, they look really professionally done, so, and there are intriguing things about the story for sure. Like this disease, like it looks like that the main bad guy, what's his name? Schism, I think.
Schism, I think, is their group.
Okay.
Yeah, I thought I had his name in my notes.
I forget his name, but while you're looking that up, so the main bad guy, he appears to have this disease, the same disease that is...
Yeah, he's got some spots on his skin.
Right. And maybe I'm misunderstanding this, but it seems like adults get this disease, but young people don't. Wasn't there something to that effect?
Yeah, something like after puberty, you're susceptible to it or something.
Right. And later in the story, they, when they do capture some of the rebels, they mention something about them being infected or something like that. So
okay, Damon is his name.
Okay. So, there's something intriguing there where you're kind of wondering what the deal is. Maybe this guy is responsible for the disease or something like that. So, and there's another thing that maybe I'm reading into this as well, but it seemed like when he was young, he was being picked on by a guy named Vasily, right? Or something?
Yeah.
And then that guy now is a henchman for Damon or something like that. So,
yeah, on page 13 of the first issue, he catches Damon and Vasily in this alley. And I had several comments about this page, but yeah, Vasily whacks Hunter on this page.
Right. Was one of your comments about this page the graffiti that...
Well... because... So, yeah, Damon is spray painting some graffiti on the wall, and one thing that he's spraying on is some kind of a symbol. It looks kind of like a swastika, except it's only got kind of 3 tentacles instead of 4.
Yeah.
And then at the end of the issue, when, after the time jump, Hunter recognizes that symbol, but I thought that on page 13, that symbol wasn't emphasized enough because I got to the end and I didn't remember that symbol and I had to look back. At the end, we got a close-up panel of it, and I think we needed that on page 13 also to tell the reader, remember this. This is important.
That's true, because I didn't notice that until you just pointed it out.
But this page, people tend to look at the comic reading the dialogue and might not notice the art all that much unless you really shove it in their face.
Right. So all of this is indicating that he's transported to the not so distant future, right? This hellscape has taken place 20 some odd years.
26
afterwards.
years, they said.
Yeah.
So also on page 13, So Vasily kind of slaps Hunter. Then Hunter is facing us, and he's got a word balloon with a question mark and an exclamation point. And then we have a few pages of flashback, and then Hunter is waking up in a different situation. So I guess this flashback, like he's dreaming this flashback. That wasn't clear to me. And also, usually question mark exclamation point doesn't mean you're getting knocked out. So, and he has this surprised look on his face, like he's seeing something. So I was really mystified by that panel, especially finding out later that he was apparently knocked unconscious there.
Yeah, I can see the confusion. I mean, honestly, now that you're mentioning some of these things, I hadn't even noticed them, to be honest. So, and I guess maybe that's, goes to show that, like, the book is still very readable, even if you don't catch every little thing. So, because I didn't really have any trouble figuring out what was going on at any point. Although now, hearing your comments, I feel like I may have missed out on some things that maybe the author wanted me to pick up on. But
now in the flashback, so apparently he's meeting Madison for the first time, this girl, and they're in a high school hallway, clearly. But and she says, you're the guy that disappeared for days back in high school. So it sounds like high school is in the past, but they're in high school here. Now, if he's dreaming this, then it would make sense that things would get kind of confused. But, a dream with things getting distorted that the reader doesn't have any clear knowledge of isn't a very good way to do a flashback. So I wasn't really sure what to make of that.
Yeah, and also, I mean, the fact that I guess the assumption is that now he is, as he's knocked unconscious in the future, he's remembering things that happened in the past, maybe. Yeah. But I honestly kind of got the impression in the first read through that he was jumping back and forth in time. But I don't really know, because it seems like this power that he has is kind of a fight or flight thing whenever he's, like when he's challenged, because when one of his teammates is trying to get the power out of him, he's antagonizing him and pushing him, and then as soon as he gets mad, it comes out. And so it could be one of those things where, when he gets slapped by this guy in the alley, this fight or flight thing kicks in and he disappears, and then that's why he was gone in high school. Because it's weird, he disappeared for a while in high school and then came back, right? So
yeah, she doesn't say that he disappeared forever. Or maybe that was a different disappearance, or I don't know.
Yeah.
Because it seems like
maybe he's like the Quantum Leap guy.
Once he disappeared, he was nowhere for 26 years and then appeared in that alley in the future.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure. And time travel stories are a slippery slope. Like, it's going to be hard to keep your story straight, even for the best of them. So, yeah.
Yeah. Minor point, on that 2-pager, which is page 18 of the PDF, I was surprised to find that in the post-apocalyptic future, bubblegum is available. Maybe that was hoarded from the before times. I don't know, but
you gotta keep the bubblegum machine churning, man. Yeah.
Okay, I think the thing that bothered me the most about this comic, repeatedly emphasized words are, they change the color of them, make them huge, and they mostly are outside of the word balloon. Mm-hmm. And things that are outside of the word balloon, my instinct is to skip them. And I kept repeatedly, like in a split second in my mind, catching myself not reading the word that was outside of the word balloon. I was just kind of editing it out of habit and then going back, oh, no, wait, there's a word that's part of the sentence, because it doesn't make sense for the word balloon to just say, let me introduce you to the...
Right.
You have to continue down to the word that's slightly overlapping the word balloon, resistance. At least you need to put those words in the word balloons. Although even then, Marvel will sometimes put a superhero's logo inside a word balloon, and I hate that. Even though it's in the word balloon, it's a graphic, and my brain just wants to skip past it.
Sure. Yeah, I to be honest, this wasn't a problem for me, and I feel like maybe the generation of comics that I was reading back in the, whatever that would have been, late 90s, that was kind of something that went on more often. I feel like putting these words outside of the balloons and stuff, and so it doesn't trip me up. And actually, I used to kind of like it when they'd put the the logos, just because I don't know, it would look cool to me, but I can totally see how that would trip you up. And I do feel like this one does do it more often than necessary. I think when I used to read it in like Marvel books, it was always something where it was like calling attention to like somebody entering the scene or something. It was like a theatrical sort of thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like when a new character enters the scene or something that they're trying to draw your attention to or something. So, but I don't have a problem with it in this book. I think that it looks dynamic and kind of cool, so I don't have a problem with it. But
okay, so I've still got some notes here.
Okay.
So the last page of the first issue, page 27, we have this reveal that Damon is the leader of this ruling group, Schism, and Madison, who we've had an implication that in the past, she and Hunter got married because we saw a wedding ring on her finger, although I bleeped past that when I first read this. It's a little bit more clear in the second issue, but now she's apparently Damon's lover. So at the time that Hunter disappeared, so let's say he's 20, and 26 years have passed. So these people are approaching their 50s, and they really don't look it.
Well, he's got that one white streak.
Yeah, I hope I age that slowly. Now, another thing here. So he says, I think you have failed enough. Now it's Vasily's turn. Wouldn't you think so, Madison, my love? She says, you're right, of course. Next issue, first page of story, she says, you're right, Your Highness. But we didn't get any reminder of what Damon had said in the previous issue. And I thought, likely some time is going to pass between reading issue 1 and reading issue 2. So I think he needed to remind us, have Damon repeat himself here just to, because, it's kind of weird that the first line is somebody saying you're right and we don't have what he said right in front of us here. What was he right about?
That's true. This is something that will work well in the trade paperback, but not when you're like launching issues over time through Kickstarter or whatever. So yeah, you're right. Although based on the email that we got from the author, it seems like they are, thinking about this in terms of the long story, like in terms of putting out a trade paperback. So that would make sense why.
It's maybe a difficult balancing act to try to do both, to do issues that are also going to be in a trade and have them read smoothly either way. Right.
Yeah. You're either going to have repeat lines as you kind of remind the reader, that remain in the trade paperback, or you're going to have things like this where you're like, what was he talking about? And you had to go back and grab issue 1 out again or something. So
now page 6 of the second issue, in that first panel, what's up with the surface of the street? It looks like it's ice. It looks like it has reflections of those bare trees in the background.
Yeah, it does kind of.
And
I don't
and maybe
think
there's snow on the grass, but Madison and Hunter are not dressed for winter. In the second panel, she's going sleeveless. So I'm not sure what to make of these two panels. Also, in that second panel, Hunter's waving to a neighbor who has a huge doorway, or else the neighbor is very short.
Yeah, that is a really big doorway. Yeah. Yeah, these drawings, I mean, the street itself is huge. It's bigger than like several houses put together as well.
Yeah, it's an awful wide street for a residential area.
Yeah, there's a few little perspective things like that, but
the smartphone at the bottom of the page is not in perspective either. Yeah,
it is. You're right. It's at a little bit of a tangent, so it looks a little bit wonky, but I would give this kind of a pass because I see these kind of things even in Marvel books where like they kind of rush through a couple panels. There is something that's a little, I don't know, a little jarring for me, and it is it's later on in the second issue when you see these people who are not even necessarily like germane to the story, but they look. So I'm talking about on page 18. There's some people who look very, very like their faces are very specific, very like they look like they were based on real people.
Yeah.
And my guess is that this was a Kickstarter.
Quite possibly.
Like a Kickstarter like backer tier thing where if you add a certain amount, we'll put your face in the book, because there's these two kind of very modern looking, like modern as in our time, not in the future looking people all of a sudden in here. So it was a little bit jarring to me.
I think I have a feeling they're pretty good likenesses though. They look realistic.
Yeah, they're well done for sure.
I don't know. I still have some more things. I guess I'm not going to get into all of them, but I forgot to mention in the first issue, so one of the rebel fighters is this young woman, and we see her on the top of a building, and there's a fighter plane of some sort coming at her, and she jumps off the building onto the plane, sticks her swords in the plane so that it blows up, but in the very next panel when it's blowing up, she's back on the top of the building, and I didn't understand the movement there. How did she get back to the building before the plane blew up?
Well, yeah, that's another one of those cinematic kind of things where I think it's supposed to be like one of those Avengers scenes where they do something that no human could possibly survive.
Sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, I needed a little bit more of a far shot there to kind of show the blocking of it.
Yeah. I know what you mean. I would say one of the things that this book suffers from is the fact that it has a lot of kind of common sci-fi action tropes all packed into one.
Yeah.
So there's things that remind me of The Matrix. There's things that remind me of, here like superhero movies. There's things that remind me of Back to the Future. Like the fact that, when just listening to you talk about the fact that, there's a girl that he likes and he sees this other guy who's going the bad path and this bully, and then he gets zapped into a different timeline and sees that now his either friend or his delinquent friend and the bully are now like in cahoots with his, love interest and stuff. It's like, very Back to the Future-esque. I feel like, in fact, and let me tell you this, I always think about that movie, because, when they go back after his dad saves the day in Back to the Future, and I apologize to the writers of this comic while I go off on a tangent here about something that has nothing to do with them, like some Robert Zemeckis thing. But when he comes back into his future in 1980, 5 or whatever it is, Biff Tannen is like polishing their car. And that is the weirdest thing to me where, it's like, hey, remember that guy who tried to rape you in high school, but I fought him off? I hired him to like wash our cars. It is one of the weirdest things about that movie, but I've learned not to unravel those movies because there's nothing left when you do that. So
yeah, it was a different time. I don't think that they would have written it that way today.
Yeah, or
if they had, like social media would have exploded.
Yeah, for sure. Anyhow, that has nothing to do with this book, but that would be my only real honest criticism about this, is that it's wearing a lot of its influences on its sleeve, and just kind of it comes off a little bit of like a hodgepodge of different genre pieces that they kind of put together. There is still plenty of originality there, kind of tying it all together, but I almost kind of wish that they would just lean more into the original elements and not really have any of the kind of tropes that you see commonly in those kind of movies or books, comic books.
Yeah, well, and when I was talking about the story at the beginning of this, I may have sounded kind of fatigued by some of the ideas because I've seen them in a lot of the comics that we've critiqued.
Yeah, that's very true. That's very true of many kind of dilettante works, I think. And I'm not trying to call this a dilettante thing, but I think that a lot of the books that we critique on this show are, somewhat amateur. And so it's easy to fall into the tropes of things that you've seen before. So, but having said all of that, I do think that this team has some really good concepts that they've got going on there, and I guess maybe I just feel like the story is a little bit too ambitious because it's going for so many things like this, this disease, like epidemic kind of story. And at the same time, this, there's some time travel elements, and then this messianic tale and heroes.
Yeah. I mean, you could break up these ideas and make 4 or 5 different comics.
Exactly. Yeah. So, I know that a lot of it is a lot of world building and stuff, but the world is rich enough that it doesn't need all of those elements, I would say. So,
yeah. But yeah, keep going. I'm sure your next book will improve over whatever you've done before. That's how it works usually. So yeah, keep at it, you guys.
Yeah, for sure. Like I said, a lot of it's very, very accomplished, and even the writing is. I can imagine it being in one of the big comic production houses. So, I hope that I honestly, genuinely hope that they keep working at it and polishing their craft, because I do see a lot of potential.
Yeah, for sure. In the show notes, you can find a link to the Kickstarter for The Fog Within, going on now. Thanks to our patrons for supporting Deconstructing Comics, Critiquing Comics, and our other podcasts. To join them, go to patreon.com/deconcomics. Patrons get access to podcasts about the early years of The Amazing Spider-Man, Jim Starlin's run on Captain Marvel, and more. Are you making a comic? Send it to us and we'll do a Critiquing Comics episode about it. Our theme is from bensound.com. Over the years, we've discussed Robert Crumb's work several times on this podcast. Next week, we go all the way back to 2008, when Kumar and I reviewed the R. Crumb Handbook, featuring Crumb at his sweetest and his most shocking. But can this or any book claim to be the perfect Crumb compilation? Listen next week. Till then, this is Tim, and thanks for listening to Critiquing Comics.